And this is an atomic bomb. This is one of the more the newer versions they had, which we will talk about. But here you see all of those are naval ships, U.S. naval ships. At the end of the Second World War, we had all these extra, we didn't need all these things anymore. And some of them were decommissioned or badly in disrepair. So we were able to test nuclear weapons on it, see what they would do to fleets. And there's pictures on that, like it would just melt and twist them out. No, they sailed them out there and got the guys and gals out of there, so they're empty.
Okay.
Yeah, they were tested on them.
They could have sold those things.
Well,
They made more money than
I don't know.
would have been richer.
I think for research and development, there's a lot of unknown about nuclear weapons. And so, yeah.
I guess the result is a little more.
Yeah. Hey, folks, it is January the 7th, 2021, and we are starting our new unit on the Cold War. So if you missed the World War II when I posted it on last Tuesday, and the notes, which have to do with the slides I'm discussing with students, are posted in the Google Classroom. And I think it's the second to last thing I posted, so it should be pretty easy to find. In fact, some of these places like the Bikini Islands and stuff like that, have had a lot of nuclear weapons testing, and there's still a lot of radiation in those areas today. In fact, the local people who live there had to evacuate, from what I understand, and were removed by the U.S. government because, cancer and stuff. All right, so Cold War. Our date range for this, though it's not fact, 1945 to 1970. Yes, we are going to talk about elements of the Cold War into the 70s and the 80s, but generally speaking, we're just going to end this unit in the early 70s. So this isn't a hard date. The Cold War does, in fact, begin in 1945, but its ending is actually more in the when we talk about the fall of the USSR later on. At the end of the Reagan administration, the beginning of the Bush administration, like the old Bush, not the young one. So we're second to last unit. All right, so this is from some Cold War museum. So here you see like Geiger counters. So these tell how much radiation is in an area. They make that little ticking sound. An emergency cell phone. Looks like a bunker. Fallout shelter sign. Canned to us. Look at a Russian uniform. I actually had a Russian babushka. It's like one of those little hats with ear flaps, kind of like Michael runs around with, and it had one of these symbols on it. Or no, it was a beret. It was a light blue beret. I think I gave it to my granddad.
Oh, isn't a babushka like a grandmother?
It is grandmother, but it's also kind of hat. So. Yeah, I didn't have that. I had the beret. That way. It's in this. It's in this. Now, it's going to take a few weeks. We're going to get there. But we're going to spend some time on Vietnam and Korea.
Actually, Vietnam from the Air Force.
Hey. Oh, cool. Yeah. Not too bad. Yeah, I like reading Vietnam. So we always start my unit with terms to know, because sometimes we come across words that aren't day to day. And so we got to know what they mean as we go along. So containment, policy based on preventing territorial acquisition by communists, right? So once again, we saw communism as a dangerous political ideology and a way that foreign countries could interfere with free countries. So when we talk about policies of containment, we're talking about trying to isolate communism and keep it from spreading at first throughout Europe and then through other areas such as Asia and South America, which are also going to have socialist uprisings. If you know what a term means, don't bother writing it down. But if you don't know, briefly write down a short definition. This is for you, not me. Communism. I tried to keep this one short. I don't know if it was effective. Economic, political, and ideological system characterized by totalitarian government, control of property, and forced religious views. There's a lot more to communism than that, but it really, yes, it has to do, it always, though it's not its intended goal, it always ends up with totalitarian government. That means it controls every part of your life, everything, every waking moment, rules for everything, and control, coercion. Your right to property is now something the government controls, and they might even take all your property. Forced religious views. Communist governments almost always ban religion because it's seen as a challenging ideology to the official Marxist ideology, and it usually leads to persecutions. Vietnamization. When we talk about the Vietnam War, this is going to be a policy where, and we still try to do this today, we try to do it in Iraq and Afghanistan, where you set up a friendly government for success and its military, and then you eventually hand the war back to them. So we were there fighting in the Vietnamese War. It was essentially a civil war that we jumped into, and we tried to get our side, South Vietnam, strong enough and hand the country back to them so they could fight the war on their own. It didn't really work. Counterculture. When people take on lifestyles that differ from mainstream media. And we're going to see this in the 60s and the 70s, which I still need to make that part. So, yeah, I still need to make counterculture slides later. So, we'll get there. And so, of course, a lot of people think hippies and stuff like that. A lot of rebellion, rock and roll, Say what?
I like your ringtone.
Well, thanks. Yeah, but I'm getting a lot of spam calls. My wife put my number on some kind of website to check our credit, but she put my number on it. So like yesterday, I got like 6 or 7 spam calls from all across the country, and it's just like robots.
I got one from Niagara Falls, and I thought of
Someone from Jamaica called me.
From Jamaica.
I like it when they say this call is from the United States. Where else would it be?
Jamaica.
Jamaica, yeah.
Jamaica.
Greetings from the King of Jamaica.
Go back.
Yeah, it's just con artists. Or I remember a long time ago, they made this national website where if you put your number in it, they were supposed to send it out to spam callers, and it was supposed to make it illegal to spam call you. And it worked really well for like a year, and then they started doing it again. So
they found a way around it.
Yeah, some way. I don't know. Of course, they're really good at. Kind of like hackers will do this too. They'll make it look like the phone calls coming from another phone. And kind of like when a hacker is hacking, they'll make it look like it's not their computer doing it, but somebody else's computer.
So it's kind of framing someone else.
In a way, yeah. But it's also, it's making it so you don't get caught. Is the thing. It's making it hard to trace. You think it's coming from here, but it's actually coming from there because they're just kind of looping it.
Yeah. That's cool. Not really close.
Not cool when they're bothering me. Let's go ahead and move on. I think there was other terms. So here we see once again, yeah, it became pretty popular for people who could afford it to make bomb shelters, things like that. Of course, with the idea of if you heard the call, like the bomb sirens that incoming missiles were coming, you would have time to get into one of these shelters because especially before you had what we call ICBMs. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, which were essentially space rockets. They go up into space and come down into orbit and blow up on the other side of the world. Very hard to trace. Before that, the bombs were supposed to be dropped by bombers. So people thought they would have enough time to kind of get one of these things and just try to wait until it was safe to go back outside in case a nuke went off. You see the guy there. Flashlight. canned food because, well, obviously it says canned food. Little radio with an antenna. I'm assuming this wire goes outside. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe it's some kind of
The garage door opener.
garage door opener. Yeah, they got little bunks.
That's cool.
Terms to know. Now, this is going to come up later on in the Nixon administration. Silent majority, reference to people who agreed with Nixon's policies but did not voice their opinions in public. So this happens sometimes where you have like polls, right? So they'll ask people, hey, who are you going to vote for before election? Like, I don't want to vote for this nor this one. Well, President Nixon said that one of the reasons why he was so popular is because a lot of people didn't want to say they'd vote for him, but then they turned out they did. He was, especially in his reelection, he was very popularly elected. He won by a very large landslide. And then Watergate became public and he was in disgrace and left office.
What's Watergate?
Watergate is the name of a hotel that his opposition party, the Democrat Party, had like kind of like their home base. They had a lot of their records. Some of President Nixon's underlings broke in and robbed some like files and stuff like that from it, and then it was made public. They were caught, and so they were like, Nixon is like stealing the election and spying on the opposition. And people were so upset about that, he wound up leaving office rather than being impeached. So there you have it. And then his vice president became president, Gerald Ford. Yeah. Domino theory, foreign policy, which stated that when communism spread to a new nation, it would then cause their neighbors to convert as well. This is why they had containment. They're like, well, if one country gets communism, then the countries around them are going to be influenced and become communism. And it wasn't just communism as in like, they were just like, hey, look what they're doing, let's do it too. It was, we're talking about like spy networks going from country to country, assassinating, setting up armed rebellions and things like that. You know, it wasn't just like handing out pamphlets and having a fireside chat. So
I heard that I think it was Mao wanted to make sort of like China communist, but not really spread it to the countries around China. And Lenin and Stalin did too. They kind of wanted to keep it there while the rest of the world remained capitalist. I'm not sure why.
You're right, because original Marxism was supposed to be the ideal. It has to do with historicism. It's like a historic inevitability is the belief that there will be a one world government without any property and equal rights for all and completely democratic across the world. That's the idea of communism. Yeah, Lenin was like, it has to start at the national level and be a nation first because we have things in common and you can't really get people from different nations to work together that well. Mao agreed with that. In Russia, however, some people were hardcore original communist, like a guy called Leon Trotsky. He was one of Lenin's henchmen, but he got into such a big disagreement with Stalin. He wound up fleeing Russia and fled, I think, to Argentina. And then Stalin sent assassins and they killed him. And I think they stabbed his head with ice picks or something. You know, it was like brutal. But yeah, Trotsky believed in like starting a worldwide revolution. And so Stalin was scared that Trotsky was going to have make so many countries mad at Russia, there'd be World War III. So, but yeah, Mao agreed.
I think he was exiled from the USSR.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he fled for his life then. Yeah, Mao had kind of like, I guess they would call him like racist ideologies. He despised Western people and Western culture. So like the first people that he had persecuted were Western business people who lived in China and missionaries and stuff like that. Like they would be the first to be executed, but like the death camps and stuff. So yeah, Mao really wanted to make China for China, but in a communist way. So like a lot of traditional Chinese things that people really liked, like festivals and Chinese traditional religions like Taoism and stuff, and even stuff like martial arts, he would have banned, just done away with and stuff. Right. So moving on. Yeah, go right ahead. We'll wait on it. Yeah, it is a prison. That's a
Well, that's a nice,
That's Berlin. Yeah, that's the Victory Arch in Berlin, right? That's still there today. So that
Why?
Berlin is going to be divided, and basically half of it will be a prison, and the other half will be a free city.
is that like barbed wire?
Yeah, that's
Still
all.
there today?
No, that's gone now. But yeah, that's concertina wire. Like it's made in like these loops where you can like stretch them out like that, and it's supposed to
I think
make
I've
it
seen them
difficult to
before.
go.
They have like blades like on opposite ends of each other. They like-
But yeah, see, this one's like barbed wire. Like the kind the U.S. military uses isn't very sharp, so you could still get jacked up if you like jumped into it and fought it, and you could have your clothes ripped up. But it's not like razor wire or like
Were they
spikes.
razor wire?
Well, they when they build the wall, they're going to have a lot of razor wire, and they're going to have like a no-go zone. Or like if you're too close to the wall, the Russians will shoot you. And a lot of people died being shot by machine guns or riflemen trying to escape East Berlin and go to the free side. So it's going to be a really big human rights thing because, and as we'll talk in a minute, Germany, sure, bad guys in World War II. I think most people will agree on that one. So the Nazis were crushed, but the country was then divided up between several countries. And on the Ally side, we tried to rebuild the country, re-educate the Germans, and help put them back on their feet. On the Russian side, it was all about control and oppression. And in Berlin, there was a lot of that. It was so bad. It was something like 1 out of 3 people who lived in the east side of Berlin were like spying on each other, like literally. And if you turn somebody in, what happened? Well, they might want, they're going to go up and they're going to talk to the KGB, and they might end up in a gulag where they'll starve to death. So it's just neighbors spying on it, just total distrust.
Well, by,
You have gunmen outside. You're living under the oppression of a foreign government that you think hates you, and really, they didn't have a lot of love for him. So, of course, it is that I guess that is a consequence for losing a world war, is that not everything turns out cheerful for you. So here we'll go ahead and move on now. So this is an overview. You don't have to write down this. What is this unit about? The Cold War is a time in U.S. history that was defined by the strong tensions between the Soviet Union, the Russians, and the United States. Really, it was, and everybody else was either on our side or their side. Generally, this era starts at the end of the Second War and into the 1980s. Key points in this period is the creation of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, still around today. It was created essentially to protect Europe from Russia. The Truman Doctrine, and we'll talk about that. The Marshall Plan is where we did a lot to help save a lot of Germans from starving. And MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction Through Nuclear Arms. Proxy wars. A proxy war is when you have two nations that don't like each other, but they don't want to fight. So they pay their little friends to fight instead. There's going to be a lot of that. The space race. Our competition between our nations is going to help lead to, like space exploration, satellites landing on the moon. The Red Scare. Yeah, and it's not the first one, but another Red Scare, another fear of communism and socialism, and changes within American culture. So, and yeah, there's gonna be a lot of that. A lot of our foreign policy today is shaped by the Cold War. The way that our militaries, where they have their bases, why our military is set up the way it is a lot of it has to do with the Cold War, really. the wars that we fought for the most part in the 20th century, a lot of them had Cold War elements to them. No, not the war in Iraq so much. I mean, I guess maybe a little bit if you traced it back to Iran, but and not the war in Afghanistan, unless you want to get really vague. All right, so don't worry, that one didn't have notes real. All right, so here we have just Stalin and Truman. So if you remember, during World War II, we talked about FDR was elected to his 4th term, but he's going to die of a heart attack. And so his vice president, Truman, will become president during the end of the war. He's the one, if you recall, who called for the atomic bombs to be dropped on Japan. And he's going to be the one who's going to help try to shape America and the world after World War II. So, post-World War II. Whereas FDR saw Stalin as someone to bring into a relationship with the West. So FDR thought we could work with him and perhaps make Russia a little less cold. Truman viewed the Soviet Union with disdain. He didn't trust them. Following World War II, America followed the ideas of the Atlantic Charter, which outlined 2 necessities for world peace. And this was international cooperation, countries working together, and deterrence through military strength. So we've seen before World War I that making alliances doesn't necessarily guarantee peace. So we're like, perhaps if we make our military super scary, people won't attack us. This required America to accept a leadership role among the world's nations. So to fulfill this plan of the Atlantic Charter, America had to have a great, big, powerful military and to station military forces throughout the globe. In a way, kind of like a prevention force, but also kind of like as a police force. The Soviets wished to also be seen as an eminent power as well. They didn't want to sit on the sidelines. So like, hey, we also conquered Germany. We're also a powerful nation, and we are completely different from the rest of your civilizations. And they wanted to see Germany reduced to a minor country. And they wanted to have friendly governments installed in their neighboring countries. These are called satellites. They wanted to have Eastern Europe as acting as small Soviet countries to protect them. Truman pointed out the Soviets were forcing communism on other countries without their permission. The Soviets said they were encircled by capitalists. So, under Marxist ideology, capitalism is always seen as a backwards competition to communism, to socialism, and something that's dangerous to socialism, and vice versa. Of course, capitalists see socialism as a danger because you can't have private investment and ownership and growth of wealth in a purely socialist society. And of course, there was other ideological differences as well, such as democracy was mouthed in Russia, but it wasn't really practiced. You had to vote a certain way or else. And so that was very anti-democratic. So the biggest point you kids need to know of this is Truman didn't trust Stalin and Stalin didn't trust America. That's the biggest point off of this. I think I'll do one more after this and we'll call it good. Now, don't forget though, when the war was going on, we were friends with the Soviets, but we weren't close friends. Our allies, they kind of like needed each other. Now we're going to see at the end of the war, they're going to start doing things that that are really going to scare other countries. They're going to start a little invasion here, a little invasion there. They're going to overthrow governments and install their own, stuff like that. Scary stuff, scary stuff. But we didn't quite know just how bad they were yet. We're not really going to know how bad that it is in Soviet Russia internally, as far as their camps and a lot of their crackdowns and rejection of human rights, basically till the 60s and 70s. That's when it's really going to come out in the open. People are going to be really like just disgusted. Let's go ahead and move on to the last one. All right, so here we have kind of a divide here. So you see Eastern Bloc. So these are the countries that are friendly to Russia for the most part. These here, they're light, kind of like light pink. They're the ones that are going to have, they're basically going to be under control. So like Poland, there's going to be a big movement to try to free Poland, but it's going to take time. In fact, they're going to have a pro-Russian government installed, but a lot of the common people are completely against it. In fact, like a lot of things like the church is basically going to be underground practicing and trying to hide. Even universities, there's going to be something called a flying university, which is essentially, it's not actually flying. What they're doing is you have a group of professors who go from city to city in secret and educate their fellow Poles while trying to avoid Russia, because they're trying to teach them the truth instead of just Russian propaganda. Some of these other countries, they'll have,
So it's not like a rebellion.
yeah, like an information rebellion. You know,
Isn't it like some Star Wars vibes?
well, yeah, it really was. And eventually, though, they're not going to have a violent overthrowing of the Russian government.
Yeah.
Eventually, they're going to get rid of them. But
So they're just secretly, like, without permission, just like leaving where they're from, and they're risking their life of going and teach other people the real truth of.
yeah, they have the VPN, right? So like,
More VPN on.
yeah, so they're so you can get something outside of the official like restrictions. And of course, you see like half of Germany here is going to be controlled by them. All right, so last one. Following the advice of U.S. historian and diplomat George Kennan, the U.S. adopted the policy of containment. So this is where containment came from. Through containment, Soviet expansion could be halted, while economic, political, and civil freedoms could be maintained. So this is nothing new. Countries have done this for a long time, where you have buffer states, right? Like let's say there's barbarians over there, or in late medieval Europe, they're like, whoa, there's the Ottoman Turks. Who were the buffer states? Eastern Europe. So a lot of times when the Ottomans would want to invade Europe, they had to go through Eastern Europe. And the Eastern Europeans would fight them in their mountains and push them back most of the time. Well, once again, Eastern Europe was made into buffer states, but instead of against the Ottomans, it was against the Russians. As Winston Churchill famously stated in 1946, an iron curtain had fallen across Europe. So Churchill came to America. I forgot what college, it was probably Harvard or something. He was giving a graduation speech, and President Truman was there, and it was very famous. A lot of people played it on the radio, it's printed in newspapers, where he kind of just stated at the end of the war what's going on now. There is a separation that you can't see past. You can't talk through. Neither side trusted one another, and it was like there was just two worlds. While Churchill was giving his Iron Curtain speech, the Soviet army invaded Iran. So, right after the war, we see that the Russians are using military means to try to take over other areas. Now, during this time, Iran wasn't quite like it is now. Iran was extremely, what's the word you want to use? Underdeveloped. A lot of the people were still very tribal at the time, almost no technology. But it was discovered that they had some natural resources like oil, and the Russians wanted themselves some oil.
The reason why we were in war with them is because we were interfering with their religion.
Well, that's what they would say.
Just kind of just ran up there and just like, oh, hey, we're here, and then they didn't like that.
Well, a lot of it's kind of here, right? So the Russians in the U.S. were kind of like, we're like, hey, leave them alone. The Russians are like, no, we're going to liberate them, even though they didn't ask for it. And so what's going to happen is eventually we're going to install a leader there who's friendly to us. But the local Iranians are going to get sick of it one day and have a rebellion. And it's a religious rebellion. A
Because
religious
they
rebellion.
they didn't want that. Because they
Yeah.
have their certain way of.
They thought we were polluting them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to this day,
It's like giving
They hate us.
a phone to an Amish person. It's like, oh, here you go.
I guess so. I haven't heard of any like violent Amish people, but yeah, today they still hate us. I mean, yeah, they had their own revolution. It was a theocracy, so it's a religious led government, and been able to heal it ever since. U.S. and UN and Britain, as United Nations, demanded that the Soviets withdraw. Though the Russians left Iran without a conflict, it showed the West that a strong stance was needed against communist aggressions. They're like, oh, shoot, World War II just ended, and now we're almost going to have World War III because the Russians can't put their guns down. And so, and it looked like, wow, Iron Curtain, Churchill was right. We can't even talk to them because they're already trying to invade neutral countries. They're like, we just fought a war over this, and they're acting crazy already. And so that's going to set the tone for the mistrust for them. All right, folks, that's going to end the lecture today. We're going to come back and, Tuesday. So it's going to be a B week. So we're also going to have class on Friday. But I will not lecture on Thursday because I'm going to be off that day. I have to go take a test. And I'm just going to be gone that time. So I will post something for y'all later, though. See you later. But yeah, I only